You broke my heart and now I'm going to burn your world. Those were the words that Amber Lee Hughes sent to her boyfriend, Ellie Chalitas, just before she murdered his daughter. And she not only murdered his daughter, but trigger warning, she SA'd her, if you know what I mean. And Carrie, you're going to ask me in the comments, how did a woman do this? Well, with an object. But before we get into it, because Amber Lee is currently being sentenced, let's recap the story. Now, Amber Lee Hughes was a preschool teacher, and she was Nada-Jane's preschool teacher. And I think she developed a crush on Nada-Jane's father, Ellie Chalitas, because she would send him love notes through her backpack. When she'd come home from school with her schoolwork, there would be love notes from Amber Lee to Ellie. And we know that this relationship between Ellie and Amber Lee was not allowed. Teachers weren't allowed to date parents, but they kept it a secret. And it developed quickly into a very passionate bond because Amber Lee would move in with him. Now, Ellie Chalitas, I don't think he ever thought that Amber Lee would hurt his child. I mean, she's a preschool teacher. This was her job, to look after small children. And he would entrust his daughter, the apple of his eye, in her care. And Amber Lee had a history of violent behavior, which we will get to now. But firstly, what we're going to talk about, we are going to talk about the fights in the past. Now, Amber Lee would constantly accuse Ellie Chalitas of infidelity. And from my experience, when someone is constantly accusing you of infidelity, it is because they are being unfaithful.
When Nada was with me and before Nada left, there was no bruising on her face. I didn't notice any bruises on Nada.
Ms. Hughes, I want to put it to you that you drowned the deceased because you wanted to burn Mr. Chalitas.
No, never.
You also tried to kill him?
No, I never hurt Nada.
The accused had allegedly threatened to kill both the girl and her father a few months before the 23rd of January 2023.
You've already made a threat that I'm gonna kill you and your child. That's the threat you made, right?
Yes.
You said you didn't mean it, but
No,
you made
my
a
lord.
threat
Yes.
to the baby's father.
It was 6 months before, my lord,
you
yes.
At this stage, 4 state witnesses and the accused have been called to give evidence. The defense is expected to call 1 witness when the matter returns to court on the 28th of this month. Bafedile Moerani, Johannesburg.
These fights would escalate between the two of them. The relationship has been described as toxic and violence would occur. Amber Lee would push cutlery and crockery off the dining room table. She would throw a brick in the windshield of Ellie's car, and she would threaten to harm Nada-Jane. But like I said, I don't think Ellie ever thought that that would actually happen. Now, we have to fast forward to the 23rd of January 2023. And the day, I don't think it started off well because Ellie was going out of town. They were living in Johannesburg at the time, and he was traveling out of town. He had gotten a job offer, and he wanted to go and check the place where he was going to be moving out. It was, I think, in a different province, and he wanted to go look at estate agents. He wanted to go rent a house. He wanted to go and check out the local schools, and he left Nada-Jane in the care of Amber for the day. But before this, Amber Lee was not working. She had been asked to resign from the school because of her behavior. We know that according to reports, she was not doing her duties properly. She was crying in her classroom during break time instead of supervising children. And we're going to get to some of those reasons later on. But what I want you to know is that she was in charge of looking after Nada-Jane. Now, according to reports, Amber immediately started blowing up Ellie's phone for the whole day. And I can imagine it would have been very stressful for him. He's busy driving, he's busy navigating a strange city, he's trying to meet with estate agents, he's trying to do all this stuff, yet Amber Lee is busy blowing up his phone, all because he did not give her a kiss goodbye. And it does sound very immature to me. and this fight was escalating. We do know that there is an age difference between them of about 10 years, but still, we are talking about a woman in her early to mid 20s. There should have been a little bit more maturity there, in my own personal view. And what would occur is that Amber would get so frustrated with Ellie that she would send him a message saying, "You broke my heart and I'm going to burn yours." And I think Ellie immediately knew that something was wrong, because he was stressed. He's in another city. He can't get home immediately. So he phones his friend and he asks his friend to go and check on his daughter. I think sometimes when I speak to parents who have lost children, they sometimes get this instinct. It's almost as if they know. Friend would pitch up at the house and immediately things were strange. The friend would enter the house, and in the house, Amber Lee was lying in the lounge, and she had some self-inflicted wounds to her wrists. But they were superficial. From what I believe, they weren't substantial. And he would march past Amber Lee and he would go into the bathroom where he would find Nada-Jane lying down, face down in the tub. He would pick her up, he would carry her out onto the sidewalk, he would rush her to hospital where she would be declared dead. And this is a horrific crime. Ellie immediately pointed the finger at Amber Lee Hughes, and Amber Lee Hughes denied the charges at first. She tried to blame everyone but herself. She even blamed the gardener, who wasn't even there that day and didn't even have access to the house. And we know that the pathologist would come to testify in court, and he would say that Nada-Jane is a 4-year-old child. It's very unlikely for them to drown in the bath because they have the ability to sit up in the bath. And we know that Nada-Jane had bruises on the back of her head, as though someone had pushed her down. And she had also been SA'd. And like I said, Carrie, you're going to say, how does a woman SA a child? Well, we don't know what was used, but I believe that an object was used because the pathologist said that there was multiple damage and attempts. Now, Amber Lee Hughes would be arrested and she would stand trial, and she would go through a lengthy trial where she would testify and tell her side of the story. And she would say that she was on the phone with Ellie. They were arguing, that is correct. But what happened was that Nada-Jane had a plushie. She wanted to wash her plushie. So Amber Lee ran the bath for her, and she put her in the bath and she drowned by herself while she was washing her plushie. And when asked to explain the self-inflicted wounds on her arms, Amber Lee would say that, "Oh, I tripped over one of the dogs and I fell into some glass." I mean, I have a few dogs myself. I trip over them often, but that's never really happened to me where I've hurt myself against glass or anything. There wasn't anything that was broken. So her story has always been a little bit suspicious. And then halfway through her trial, after wasting the court's time, after wasting taxpayers' time, and pointing the finger at the gardener, saying it's the gardener that perhaps SA'd this poor child, Amber then changed her mind and she pleaded guilty to Nada-Jane's drowning as well as perjury, but she did not admit the SA charge. She still denies it to this day. Now, Amber Lee Hughes was found guilty of all of these things.
Today, the Johannesburg High Court has heard new shocking revelations from the murder and rape accused former preschool teacher Amber Lee Hughes' admissions, Hughes' and murder of a former partner's child, Nada-Jane Challita. Challita's body was found floating in a bathtub in the Bedford View apartment she and her father, as well as his partner, lived in 2023.
My intention initially was to plead guilty on the murder. However, due to incidents and occurrences beyond my control, I decided not to plead guilty on the murder. I admit that I've drowned the deceased Nada-Jane Challita, 23 January 2023, by sitting on her, which had the result that she was submerged in the water. I admit that my actions were unlawful and that I had the intention to drown the deceased. I admit that the whole event was triggered by a fight I had with the deceased's father concerning his infidelity, and the final trigger was when he told me that I should stop bombarding him. I admit that after the deceased did not respond, that I left her in the bathtub whilst the cold water tap was left running. I admit that I then went outside and attempted to herself, but that I could not find a suitable rope.
You want to know how I'm really feeling? I'll tell you how I'm really feeling. Now I know legally that she killed my child. Now I'm waiting to know for how long she tortured her for before she killed her. That's the truth. If that's the actual truth as is, you know. How could you explain a child and murdered when there's only one person in the house and someone crying, no, I'm innocent for 2.5 years? Where's the logic in this? We are human beings. We are not animals. What differentiates us from animals is our consciousness.
And she is currently being sentenced, and there was extensive sentencing hearings going on today, specifically by a psychosocial worker, and we got a little bit of a glimpse into Amber Lee's childhood life. Now, Amber Lee, she has been diagnosed with borderline personality, bipolar, and PTSD. Now, let me tell you, I know many people with bipolar disorder. I have it in the family. I know many people with borderline personality, and they do not go around unaliving people. I personally do not think it is an excuse. I myself have a mental disorder, which I take my medication from in order to keep my brain chemistry in check. And my own personal opinion is the onus is on you when you have been diagnosed with a condition for you to manage it, for you to make sure that you receive the right medication, that you receive the right care, because at the end of the day, the onus is on you to manage your own brain chemistry, which is currently what I do.
Self-confessed killer Amber Lee Hughes appeared in the Johannesburg High Court today for her sentencing proceedings. Taking the stand today, social worker Johan Volmerans had given her testimony as the defense's witness. The court had heard that Amber Lee Hughes had many traumatic events that contributed to her behavioral patterns.
The accused's inability to adapt to changing circumstances and her deficient ways of dealing with challenges surfaced during the adolescent development phase. The accused was referred for psychological treatment at the age of 9. This was a warning sign to her parents to recognize that she was indeed mentally ill from a young age. The accused's deficiency in dealing with challenges and the fact that challenges resulted in inappropriate behavior such as lies, manipulation, and the continuous self-harm and suicide threats were all warning signs of a poor judgment and the fact that she was mentally very ill.
During her testimony, the judge had raised concern over some of the evidence provided by the social worker, stating that she does not have any authority to speak on any psychosocial analysis.
That is wrong, but your distinction, you are not qualified to give the court that distinction because you are not testifying as a psychiatrist or as a psychologist.
I do agree with you.
So when I asked you, you said the source is the report. Now we are at the report, then there is no such distinction in that report.
I therefore do withdraw what I said, my lord, because then I read wrong. And
but you
my
should have withdrawn
interpretation
it
was
earlier
wrong.
then. You should have withdrawn it earlier.
Sentencing proceedings are expected to continue tomorrow in the Johannesburg High Court. Ndogozo Khumalo, Eyewitness News, Johannesburg.
And we know that her mother would eventually succeed in unaliving herself. I have to say these words because of YouTube, because of TikTok. Otherwise, my monetization gets struck. So unfortunately, I do have to say these words. But her mother eventually did self-unalive herself, if you know what I mean, in 2022. And that was a very traumatic experience for her. And additionally, the social worker would go on to say that Amber Lee Hughes was extremely manipulative. And because of this, she was able to easily manipulate people around her. Now, this was the first day of sentencing, and I will be checking it out tomorrow. The sources that I used for this YouTube video include incredible reporting from News 24. Please go and give them a shout out and a follow because they do amazing work. And I've also clipped in some things here, I believe, from the SABC. Now, if you like what I do, I have another channel, and I will be posting a ghost story later this week on my African X-Files for Halloween. So hopefully we can have some fun with that side of the things as well.